welcome back to the YouTube channel. On today's episode, we're gonna be watching a video where a guy talks about squares in video games. I can't wait.
Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Nintendo's recent very faithful square for square remakes.
This isn't Minecraft. The term faithful remake is surprisingly one of the more clearly defined terms regarding remakes or remasters or reboots. All those terms have become so confusing that you can just slap a re in front of any word and it will probably be a video game. But a faithful remake is when a game is completely remade from the ground up, but in a way that ultimately changes very little about the gameplay or core design. I saw this term really start to blow up with the reveal of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but it also applies to two Nintendo remakes that happened both before and after that game. The Link's Awakening, Diamond and Pearl, and Mario RPG remakes were all recently revealed, if you have no concept of time, and they're all extremely similar in how they update their original games. But the initial reception to each reveal was dramatically different. I haven't really seen anybody directly compare these games, and I got curious enough to look into it myself. So, let's chat for a bit about right from the initial reveal of this game, it was received pretty well. For the most part, people really enjoyed the art style, and they were just excited to have this game on a modern platform. But at the same time, there were people who were either hesitant about the art style or concerned about the game seeming to lack any new content. Of course, less people were worried about new content later when the Dungeon Maker was revealed and all the quality of life updates, but the art style was still an issue to some. Although, ever since the 80s, part of the initiation process to becoming a Zelda fan has been to learn about the Wind Waker art style debacle of 01. So most fans are used to judging every new art style on its own. And in the case of Link's Awakening, that meant it was decently mixed. Though it did seem like the majority was leaning towards positive. I personally was not a big fan of the art style. It's definitely grown on me more since the initial reveal, but having the reveal start with the opening cinematic kind of set my expectations wrongly. The opening looks gorgeous, so having it then just smash cut to toy dioramas was not exciting, personally. I can understand and respect the diorama art style. It's a dream, I get it, it has to look a bit different. But ultimately I just can't help but feel a little disappointed when it goes from the opening cutscene to that. But after I played both of the games for footage for this video, I ended up noticing a ton of small improvements that made me appreciate the remake a lot more. It didn't fix everything, like the sliding rock puzzles. I'm still not clear how those are supposed to work, because it seems like you can only push a rock once, but only in some directions. But we can probably just say that I'm as dumb as the rocks I'm trying to push. So outside of the subjective nature of the art style, the game's just overall aiming to be what the original was, but polished up to the point that it's the ideal version of the original. And that's not even mentioning the music, which obviously all of the music was incredible. So overall, the initial reception to the reveal was pretty positive because Zelda fans didn't really expect anything in particular, and the game did what it was going for pretty well. But the same cannot be said about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Having been revealed at the same time as Pokemon Breath of the Wild, BDSP attempted to follow the remake formula of the other recent Zelda title. However, the initial reveal to the game was met pretty negatively, and that's kinda due to what I was slightly alluding to with the Link's Awakening section, which is the expectations of what the remake would be. A Pokemon remake is inevitable. People were expecting a Diamond and Pearl remake pretty much exactly when it happened, And there was a precedent with other Pokemon remakes that a Pokemon remake would basically take the style of the most recent mainline game, it would include all of the Pokemon from the newer games, and it would basically take all of the old systems from the game and apply them to the new, updated, more polished formula. And in a lot of cases, these would combine a lot of the elements of the original 2 games and the 3rd version, and then add some new content on top of that. But I don't think people were ready for the Gen 4 remakes to take nothing from Pokemon Platinum, which already was polishing the original 2 games a lot, adding a lot of new content and all of that. And in terms of art style, people just didn't really like it. The art style was again trying to go for that diorama feel. That's just not a thing Pokemon has ever done. And while it was pretty universally negatively received, obviously you could prefer the remakes, and it was a Pokemon debate, so it got really heated really quickly, and in the end, both sides of the argument sounded a little dumb because people were trying to put objective reasoning to subjective opinions. But one of the big points was this idea that this is how the old games looked. You know, this sort of simplified chibi overworld art style with more detail in the battles. Though I think it was probably just because of the limitations of working with pixel art. But then the debate gets muddied up with, like, obviously this is how the game was made, so to some degree this is how it was intended to look, but then we're just sort of guessing how the designers felt back in the day when they were creating the original game. And that's all just off the assumption that a remake should be based off of the intentions of the original designers, which is its own whole issue that we'll have to leave for later. So outside of the art style, one of the differences I noticed while playing the games was that there was now a built-in EXP share, which I can enjoy. I did have to go out of my way to switch train my second Pokemon in the original Diamond and Pearl, but it seems to balance out the EXP share because random encounters were also way less frequent in the remake. It took a while for me to get my first ever wild encounter. So while I haven't played Platinum before, so I don't know how the remakes compare to that, I can at least admit that this remake is a slightly improved version of basic Diamond and Pearl. However, I still don't really like the art style. I don't hate BDSP, but I will say my absolute least favorite part of that is that now every time I go to a Bulbapedia page for a Gen 4 character, instead of the old Ken Sugimori art, it's a fake Smash Bros. Render. And the last of the 3 is Mario RPG. This remake hasn't released yet, but to me the most interesting part is just the initial reception to the reveals of each of these, so we're already good there. When this game was revealed, it was met with nothing but praise. I've seen almost nobody have any issues with any part of this remake, and it makes sense why. People didn't expect anything to happen with this game. I mean, the fact that it got on the SNES Classic was already shocking, and then Geno got into Smash as a Mii costume in Smash 4 and then again in Smash Ultimate, so people were kind of hopeful something would happen, but a full-scale remake was so drastic that I'm sure most people were just excited by the announcement itself. However, when I first saw the Mario RPG remake, just watching the reveal trailer, not seeing anybody's reaction to it, my first thought was that the game looked a little stupid. Just, like, not bad. I just thought everybody looked a bit too squished. So I was shocked, but pretty happy to see that nobody else had that issue, because I never played the original growing up. I have no attachment to it. So, the fact that I have that issue doesn't matter. What does matter is that people who have grown up on the game enjoyed this one a lot, and again, I think this is because of expectations. Unlike the other 2 games that were just fully 2D art as sprites, this is 3D models as sprites. And probably the only reason it is sprites is because the fidelity of these 3D models was too much for the SNES to handle. You know, like a Donkey Kong Country situation. So, taking a game that was sprites of 3D models and instead making it actual 3D models is pretty clearly gonna go over well, but gameplay-wise, it does look like more is being adjusted than the other 2. Link's Awakening got the Dungeon Maker as like a little side mode, and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl got the Grand Underground, which was so cool that it made people more disappointed that the rest of the game wasn't like that. I'm sure Mario RPG will have at least the one big thing like the other two games. We have yet to see what that is, but I have no doubt that it is going to be a thing. Though there have been some other smaller tweaks to gameplay that we have already seen, like the battle system seems to have this new meter and like combos or something. Something weird's going on with the battle system. However, I will say, for my time playing the original, I am hoping that there are some other changes that we haven't seen. For example, I found myself having to grind a lot more than I was expecting for the beginning area of the game, and while I'm just bad at video games, I still wasn't particularly having fun with the action commands. All of the timings just felt really awkward and like guarding against enemies. They'll like impact with your character, and then it's half a second later is when you have to block. To some degree, I can be fine with the action commands being a bit obtuse like that. I've played rhythm games with worse clarity than this, but it was just on top of the fact that I was already having to grind battles and wasn't particularly enjoying them. So I'm hoping that the remake has those small fixes, because that's kind of what BDSP lacked, and was why that game could debatably be worse than the games it was remaking. And while doing a very faithful remake of a game people love seems like a safe way to make a lot of money, if you mess something up, people can and will just go back to the original games instead. And to some degree, it makes me feel like remakes like this are a bit redundant. Nowadays, there is no shortage to the number of ways you can play an old video game. So just the idea of remaking a game where the only big difference is the visuals and music, which are both subjective and something people already enjoyed before, is confusing to me. I feel like the point of a remake is to recreate the game with modern standards in mind, or to simply cast aside the old limitations so you can create the game as the original designers envisioned it. But other people think the point of a remake should be to just polish what it already was. The game was created with its limitations in mind, and it turned out good anyway, so changing everything so drastically would feel a little pointless if all you have to do is just polish a couple of imperfections on this otherwise great game. And obviously I can understand seeing it like that. I really enjoyed the small tweaks in Link's Awakening, and even the few improvements in BDSP were greatly appreciated. And there's undeniable value in just polishing a game so that it's as good as someone's cherished childhood memories of it. But I personally feel like if you're gonna put in all of these resources and all of this money, then the last thing I want is a game that feels the same as one from 20 years ago. Like, Samus Returns is infinitely more compelling to me conceptually, because it's not just Metroid 2 from the Game Boy, but it looks better. Instead, it's completely reimagining this setting as a modern Metroid game, having modern Metroid mechanics, and taking all of the old upgrades from that original game and trying to fit them into a new formula. It's just really cool to see all of that happen. But that's the thing. I find it cool to see. Outside of getting some footage for this video, I haven't played any of these games before, so I'm not really the target audience here. To me, the main value these remakes would have had is just being able to see how the elements of the old games were fit into this more modern title with potentially very different mechanics and standards. And while I'll miss out on that, I instead get to see a lot of people just gushing about a game they enjoy getting remade and polished up. And since I have no personal reason to care about the remakes, seeing that the people who do care are happy is about all I can ask for. I'll still stay over here advocating that more elaborate remakes are more interesting in this era where original games are easily available already, and the only games being remade nowadays are ones that were already good. But if you grew up on these games, then I hope you enjoy the remakes regardless of my personal disappointment. Because this is the internet, whether there's an opinion that you hate or an opinion that you love, it doesn't matter. The only opinion that should matter to you is your own. So I'm glad that these overly faithful remakes are ultimately well received by the people that they're supposed to appeal to. except for Pokemon fans. And if Pokemon Company does an extremely faithful remake of Pokemon Black and White, then it's my turn to rightfully complain.